Dear friends, I am glad to welcome you to my channel. Like it and subscribe to the channel. It is not difficult for you, but not pleasant. Well, we're starting. When your main talent is that you are big and hardy, like me, then this does not give you the right to take up many jobs. I'm 190 centimeters tall, weigh 130 kilograms, and I would have become the NCAA heavyweight wrestling champion in my freshman year of college if I hadn't been disqualified in the finals for breaking my opponent's arm with an allegedly illegal move. Shortly after this incident, I dropped out of college. I truly believe that I would become a world-class MMA fighter if I did this, as I also have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in addition to my wrestling experience. However, I think I have a pretty face. I'm not too vain, am I? And I didn't want to spoil it, so I had to find something else. After a couple of terrible and unpromising jobs, I got a job as a bodyguard for one of the richest people in the world. I won't give his name. I'll just call him Man. Besides being a great businessman, this man also passionately supports various political candidates, has strong political views, and invests his money in what he believes in. I became one of his favorite people when I saved his life twice, beating the crap out of 3 attackers on one attempt and 2 on the other, including stopping a bullet meant for him with my Kevlar vest. About 2 years after I started working for this man, I noticed that he was becoming more and more worried about one of the Republican presidential candidates, Michelle Bachmann. He considered her dangerous and wanted to make sure she didn't get the Republican nomination. He trusted me to carry out the plan he had devised to prevent this from happening. The plan devised by the man I wasn't smart or resourceful enough to think of it was to buy a house next to her suburban bungalow in Florida, kidnap her in an obvious way in a car with license plates belonging to a rival political agent, and then hold her captive in this house until the end of the Republican convention. This man spent about $500,000 on strengthening the case, sound insulation, and protection from electronic eavesdropping, that is, on what we called a safe house. The man spent another $250,000 to make this place quite acceptable, since his intention was not to embarrass her, but simply to keep her from being nominated. I had to tell no one about this plan, and I was the only one he trusted to carry out the kidnapping and then keep an eye on her for several months. Michelle's security, if you can call it that, was a joke. She had 2 inexperienced bodyguards and covered her travel schedule well. After the Iowa election, she planned to return to her Florida home for a few weekends. One evening, when she arrived, I was already there. After making sure that the security cameras in the guarded house would record all this, I changed into a professional suit and waited for Michelle to appear in front of her house, accompanied by 2 of her bodyguards. I stopped the kidnapping car, the same make and model, with the same license plates as the rival politician, parked behind her car, got out, injected one of the unsuspecting guards with sleeping pills, hit another, who lost consciousness, clamped Michelle's mouth with one hand and gave her a sleeping pill injection. I put her in my car and drove away. I just drove around the block, parked the car in a secure windowless garage at the back of a secure house, and took Michelle inside. I kept Michelle out of the house until about noon the next day. Of course, the cops, the FBI, and who knows what other law enforcement agencies were crowding around Michelle's house at first light. Around 7 a.m., there was a knock on my door. I pretended that I had just gotten up. It was a state trooper and 2 FBI agents who introduced themselves and showed me their IDs. They wanted to know if I had seen or heard anything. I didn't hear anything. I slept like a baby last night, but I have a surveillance camera that may have footage that will help you. Really? Where's the camera? One of the agents asked. Here, let me show you, I replied, leading them outside to where the camera was. It was deliberately disguised so that it would not be so clearly visible. Did she work last night? I'm sure it is, Agent Thomas. Could you give us the tape? No problem, Agent Thomas. Come in. I wanted all 3 of them to think that I had absolutely nothing to hide. So I invited them in, led them straight to the tape recorder, took out the tape and handed it to them. Do you mind if we take it, copy it, and return it to you? Hey, I have a lot more tapes, so if there's not something on them that might interest me, just keep it. Thank you. We appreciate it. When everything calmed down a bit, I woke Michelle up. What am I doing here? Those were her first words when she came to her full senses. I just wanted you to take a break from the election campaign, so I invited you to my home in Georgia. Who are you? Just a person who is interested in you. My name is Brian. What are you going to do to me? She asked with tears in her eyes. I can assure you that you will not be harmed in any way, and you will be treated with respect. I just can't let you leave until the Republican convention is over. As soon as this is over, you will return to your family. But it will ruin my dream, she sobbed, and large drops of tears flowed down her cheeks. I felt sorry for her, but I also felt something else. My organs started to bulge out of my pants. For the first time, I noticed, this is a really beautiful woman, even if she is 20 years older than me. I told her where her bathroom was with a change of clothes and invited her to come to the kitchen for a snack as soon as she changed. It is clear that Michelle was depressed for the first week. However, by the end of the first week, she realized that there was no way I would harm her in any way, so at least it didn't bother her anymore. By the end of the second week, she began to relax and accept the situation. She also began to appreciate what I cooked for her 3 times a day and began to help me with cooking. In fact, she was locked in her spacious, guarded bedroom only when I went shopping or at night when she went to bed. Even then, I thought it would be too much because she couldn't even figure out where the guarded house was, let alone escape. But that's exactly what the man told me to do, and I did it. Spending most of our waking hours together, Michelle and I obviously got to know each other very well. Our political views were different, but we discussed political issues intelligently and respectfully. We worked out in the fully equipped gym of the guarded house, swam in the indoor pool, played board and video games, watched movies, read books, and watched the presidential campaign on TV. At first, Michelle didn't like that I didn't buy her the thick makeup she was used to. But thanks to a perfect diet, 2 hours of exercise, or swimming a day and no stress, she shone. I told her she looked amazing without makeup, and after a while she believed me because it was true. About 6 weeks later, we started talking about love for the first time. I remember it well. When we were chatting over dinner, I asked her how she felt about people being able to pray for gays to disappear, when she shocked me. Can I tell you something in confidence, Brian? Will you never tell anyone? It was the first time she made it clear that she was ready to trust me. Of course, Michelle. I'll keep it a secret. I literally spat out and started choking on my food. Michelle got up from her chair, started slapping me on the back, asking, "Are you okay, Brian?" I came to my senses in about a minute. I'm sorry, Michelle. I expected you to tell me something confidential, but I wasn't ready for it. I'm sorry that I had such a reaction, but I definitely won't tell anyone about this. I'm sorry. I embarrassed you with my excessive frankness, didn't I? No, not at all. I'm honored that you've been so honest with me. Even though you never had a choice, I feel like we've become good friends. I really, really like you. A wide smile appeared on Michelle's face. Thanks. It's a great honor for me. If I'm supposed to be someone's prisoner, then I'm glad it's you. We laughed heartily. Then, to my even greater amazement, she continued, but now I was careful, taking small bites and swallowing immediately. My husband and I have not had love for many years, and our intimacy has never been passionate. He's the only man I've ever had love with. Sometimes it seems to me that I have missed something in life, although intimacy is not as important to me as my career. Considering how beautiful you are, I'm sure guys have been after you for most of your life. You must be a really strong person to resist temptation. This brought another big smile from Michelle as she gently touched my hand and said, "How sweet of you to say that, even if it's an obvious exaggeration." Before I could answer, she changed the subject. That evening, I felt the tension for the first time when we were playing board games and watching a movie. Michelle didn't really know how to flirt, but I got the impression that she was trying to do it that night. This was reinforced in my mind when she hugged me for the first time, saying good night, which led to an instant boner that she couldn't help but notice. I hardly slept that night, thinking about how to get into Michelle's panties. Despite the fact that she was more than 20 years older than me, I liked her more and more. Not only was she a naturally beautiful woman, but 6 weeks of exercise and proper nutrition had put her body in order. I needed to get her out of my mind. It wasn't easy to clear my mind of lustful thoughts about Michelle. She was extremely kind when she got up the next morning after our conversation about love and insisted on making me my favorite breakfast. She was wearing the most revealing outfit from her current wardrobe, very unusual. When we read the morning papers together, she showed off her legs and even a little cleavage. When, After our food was digested, we went for a morning swim. She put on a two-piece swimsuit for the first time. Not a thong bikini, but it showed her truly beautiful body better than ever before. When we got out of the pool, she asked me to wipe her from behind. It was the first time. By the time I finished, I had an obvious boner. When she turned around, she saw it and stared at me. When I turned around in embarrassment and was about to leave, she grabbed my arm. Am I turning you on, Brian? I'm sorry, Michelle. You know you've never been attracted to me, despite the fact that I'm in your power. You are my prisoner. It would be wrong of me? My mind wasn't working very well and I couldn't say anything else. I think I should be grateful because you could do anything you wanted to me, and I would be powerless to stop you, Michelle sighed, twirling my hair with one finger and looking into my eyes without blinking. Shit, I'm just a man. I grabbed her, lifted her off the ground, and pressed my lips to hers. She didn't even resist when I lifted her off the ground with one hand and ran the other over her. She even put her arms around my neck. After I split her lips and tormented her body until I was so hard that I could barely stand it, I put her back on the pool deck, turned her around, literally tore off her swimming trunks and bent over the chaise longue, putting her hands on the armrests. I ran my hand over it and found that it was completely wet and not from the water in the pool. Michelle's moan was the loudest I've ever heard from a partner. I was more energetic than lightning. I couldn't believe how tight it was for a woman who had children. If it hadn't been so wet, I don't think I would have been able to climb into it, let alone move at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour. At first she said yes, 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 but as soon as she started shaking, she didn't say a word anymore, just moaned continuously. By the third finish, she was almost limp. After about the third serving, she shuddered and twitched. God, I felt great, but then I started to doubt. I misunderstood her. Did I royally screw up? I got my questions answered when, after I finally got out of her and picked her up from the chair, she buried her head in my chest, cupped my face in her hands, looked into my eyes and sighed. I've almost never had a finish line in my life, and of course none of them were as powerful as you just saw, and it has never been plural. Wow. I picked her up in my arms, took her to the shower, and we washed up together. No sooner had we washed up than I started to harden again. Then Michelle touched me with her hand for the first time. Her deep-set eyes drilled a hole in my head, and she smiled seductively. This instantly completed the hardening process. I lifted Michelle off the ground, and she wrapped her legs around me. I penetrated her and gently bit her neck and shoulder, beating the shit out of her again. She had 2 more pleasures before I made her go limp again. In the end, we got up and cooked dinner together. I persuaded her to help with dinner, wearing only an apron and high heels, and she giggled like a teenager all the time. After a great and very fun dinner, she persuaded me, which was very difficult to do, to shave her pubic hair. We watched the movie together, and before it was over, we attacked each other again. I hugged Michelle, giving her time to recover. Then I carried her to the bed, put her ankles on my shoulders, and penetrated her again. The first time I loved her, she started beating. A little extra effort on her part pushed me to the limit. I was rewarded with Michelle's simultaneous pleasure. The next few weeks were heavenly for me. Michelle and I slept together every night and made love at least twice a day. I've never been so satisfied in my life, especially since Michelle turned into a tigress. A few days after our first intercourse, she loved me as much as I loved her. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening outside the safe house. Despite the fact that Michelle had not appeared in public for more than 2 months, her rating in the opinion polls was growing, and she even won one primary. Law enforcement officials were desperately trying to find her, and their efforts were reported daily by the national press. However, they were no closer to finding her than they were on the day she was abducted. The man was upset by her rise in the opinion polls, and when he called me in April, he was excited. Brian, I greatly underestimated the reaction of the public. I decided that she would hurt herself with her words if we released her, and I cannot allow the vote for her out of pity to continue. So find a way to let her go, so that she doesn't know where she was being held, but so that she gets back to campaigning as soon as possible. Yes, sir. She will be free in 3 days, and I guarantee that no one will trace your connection. That night, before going to bed, I told Michelle about it. A wide smile appeared on her face. She threw me on the bed and kissed me for the first time. She wasn't that good at it, but it really turned me on because I knew that, according to her, it was the first time she kissed. However, before she turned me on completely, she straddled me. While I was sleeping, I had an idea. Why not try and help accuse one of her political rivals of kidnapping? When I woke Michelle up with a kiss and told her about my plan, she started giggling and quickly agreed. I didn't want to reveal her details so that she would have a plausible rebuttal, but I took some photos of her at a house owned by another Republican candidate before letting her go. I took her blindfolded to the place where she wanted to be released. When we kissed goodbye, she asked for my full name and address. Can you believe that I won't give you away, Brian? Michelle, you gave me the best time of my life. If you don't share my feelings, you can turn me into the police. I'll take the medicine. I wrote my full name, address, and home phone number, not a cell phone, on a piece of paper and gave it to her. I knew that I would have to change jobs, and I told the man about it. After I anonymously sent to the leading newspapers all the fake information I had fabricated about the involvement of Michelle's rival in her abduction, a scandal broke out. Her opponent has plummeted in the polls despite his desperate denials. Some of the comments I heard from members of the public after her release seemed very funny to me. The conversation at the booth next to me in a cafe in the Midwest was typical. So who are you going to vote for, Joe? You know, Billy, I'm getting more and more attracted to this woman. Oh yeah, me too. You know, I used to think that she was too tense and needed good intimacy. But since she was kidnapped, she is no longer self-contained, but open and confident. I think I'll vote for her too. When Michelle joined the election campaign again, beautiful without makeup, with a slimmer figure, confident and lively, she gathered supporters like honeybees. Some of her more extreme views were toned down. I like to think that was the result of her conversations with me, so she became more popular. In the Shock of the Century nomination, she won the Republican nomination at the convention. I laughed. I was proud of her, but at the same time saddened that this man's plan had failed because he had always been kind to me and had given me a six-figure severance package. 3 or 4 days after the convention, I was preparing my resume after dinner when I saw several black SUVs pull up to my apartment building in Garden. For me, it was a "oh shit" moment. I was ready to answer for Michelle's kidnapping, but I didn't necessarily like it. I decided a long time ago that I would never betray a man and would not tell anyone about the nature of my relationship with Michelle. I opened the door to a knock from 2 Secret Service agents. Mr. Van Dyke? Yes, it's me. Mrs. Bachman would like to meet with you about her election campaign. One of the agents motioned to another agent, who opened the door of the limo, and Michelle got out. She looked better than ever when she stepped out of the dim light of the surrounding streetlights and entered my apartment. Turning to the agents at the door, Michelle said, "I'll be talking to Mr. Van Dyke for a couple of hours. Could you make sure I'm not disturbed?" "Yes, Mrs. Bachman." Without words, just with a smile, Michelle took my hand and led me to my bedroom. I remember thinking, I am very glad that all the curtains are tightly drawn and my house has good sound insulation. When we entered the bedroom and Michelle closed the door behind me. "I really missed you, Brian. Should I be offended?" I asked with a sly grin. "Why don't you just hold me down and we'll talk about it later? But be careful when taking off my clothes. I don't want to look like that when I leave. Maybe then we shouldn't make love," I said with a devilish smile. "You're bad," Michelle said, pulling my face towards her and planting a perfunctory kiss on my lips. "I really missed you, Michelle," I purred in her ear. "After madly making love to you, I'm not sure I can continue without refreshing treatments at least a couple of times a week. I want you to be my personal guard and carry my bags. We need to be careful, but more than anything, I want to make love to you." I think she realized that my answer was yes when I pinched her and then made love to her again. End.